Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our fourth Let's Talk Rules session. And this week we're going to look at Rule 8, States of Play, and Rule 10, Ball at the Net. The reason that we have both of these together is that they're relatively interlinked in terms of States of Play refers to Rule 10. And we can therefore take them both together, which is really good. So what are we covering? So Rule 8 covers essentially two elements, ball in or ball out. And Rule 10, ball at the net, covers the ball crossing, touching and being in the net. So we'll get, as per normal format, we'll look at the rules of game, referee guidelines as such as they are for this area, some of the casebook examples, but I've managed to think of a few of my own so I shall be asking questions later, so be prepared. And we can look at some video situations and discuss the referee response. Okay, so states of play and ball at the net. So these two rules cover probably the majority of decisions which you make during a game. When you think about how many times you make a decision on, we talked last time about ball, when we were talking about ball handling, that you make, sometimes 30 odd decisions in a rally. Well, when you're actually making the number of decisions which actually end a rally, then these two rules are the ones that are predominant when you're ending a rally, or as I say, it covers when you begin the rally as well. So these two, you have to understand them. They're fundamental. They're one of the building blocks of being a referee. So states of play. So Rule 8. And Rule 8 tells us that the ball is in play from the moment of the service hit. Okay, so that's important because you know that the players must be in the correct rotational order until the ball is in play. Okay, so that starts to then make you think about, well, when do rules start becoming relevant to you? And the first key one is this one of the ball being hit, starting the rally, and the ball being in play from that point onwards. Okay. And then it also goes on to say that the ball is out of play at the moment at which a fault is whistled, or in the absence of a fault, a moment of the whistle. So that makes it clear that the referee is controlling when the ball is in play. And as referees, we have to make sure that both teams, when we talked about service, Rule 12, we discussed that one of the things before service authorization and the whistle to allow a player to put the ball into play, you have to make sure that everyone's ready for that moment. And you have to do your checks to make sure that that's okay. And then the players have to understand with your whistle why the rally has ended or something else has happened, and you use the whistle. So it's whistle to authorize the service or allow a player to put the ball in play, or whistle to end the rally or to determine that the ball is now out of play. So 8.3 then talks about ball in, and the ball in rule you have to know, and it has changed. It changed 2 years ago or so with the introduction of the challenge protocols. And the rule now says the ball is in if at any moment of its contact with the floor, some part of the ball touches the court, including the boundary lines. So we know that the boundary lines are drawn inside the court. So therefore we're talking the very outer edge of the boundary lines, and Rule 1.3.2 tells us that information. But when we're also looking at this rule about whether the ball is in if it's close to the boundary lines, we're also considering one of the next parts of the rule in 8.4.1, which tells us that the ball is out if the part of the ball contacting the floor is completely outside the boundary lines. And the key word here is completely. Okay, so if the ball is not completely outside the boundary lines, then the ball must be in. Okay, so in the old rules, and some of you that have been refereeing for a number of years will know that the rule used to say that at the first contact of the ball with the floor, if the ball is in or out. Now we know that with the ball, we can see here this particular photograph of the ball is showing a slight compression. Well, let's take that on a bit further and see an actual slow motion video of a ball compressing. Okay, so here is that that. Okay, sorry, I didn't realise I had sound on it, but let's just take it back a couple of frames. So this is the ball just about to land, I think. No, that's coming off the ground. So let's just go and get it to the point where it's going to just about land, which is somewhere around there. Stop it. Need to get it to stop. Hang on. If I can get it to stop where it is. There, that's what we want. So this is the point at which the ball has compressed the most. And we know that, if the ball has a circumference of between 65 and 67 centimetres, then we've got a ball diameter of about 21 centimetres. And you can see here that the ball is pretty much halved in that point of compression with the floor. So you've got here a ball which is now, if you could take the old rule with the contact point of the floor, the ball has now actually moved that point of which the ball can still be in by about half its width. So a good sort of 8 to 10 centimetres further out of the court to still be in than it was under the old rule. Okay. So the first referee and the line judges need to be careful that you understand why this rule has changed. It's different. So if we look at the photograph we've got here, which is the same one we used before, we can see that if we were using the first contact of the ball with the floor, the ball is most likely going to be out. But obviously now, with our compression, we know that the ball is definitely in. And when you're tracking a ball and you're watching a ball in play, and line judges have to have the same approach, that you need to try and anticipate getting to the point at which the ball is going to contact the floor, and then just trying to look at that contact. If you track the ball, because of the speed at which you're looking at the ball, and we'll see this in a video in a minute, what you're looking at is sometimes frames after the ball has actually landed, and therefore you tend to be given the impression that the ball is out when it's in. Okay, so you need to just be careful about this. The other thing is that when you're obviously looking down on a ball, so if you're first referee and the ball is being hit across court to your sideline, then a lot of the time, if it's close to you, you're looking down on that ball, and you will not be able to judge exactly where that contact point with the floor is. So you need your support of your line judges, particularly on that sideline, and it's always worthwhile trying to do some training yourself to look at the ball coming across court towards you and trying to work out where you are seeing the ball and the contact, and help get that into your mind. And that's one of the reasons, or one of the things that you could be doing, for example, when you're watching the warm-up. You could be looking at balls being hit against lines and just making sure that you're comfortable that, yes, you are attuned to what's going on. So let's have a look at this. This is a series of close decisions. Now I'm not looking at the decisions themselves, but at some point, I think it's 2 or 3 into this. They're relatively quick. You can see what I mean about tracking a ball and what the ball looks like, about whether you think it's contacted or not. And I'll try and point it out when we get to that point. So here you can see that that with Hawkeye it's more difficult. They don't actually show the actual ball contact with the ground anymore. They just show the representation of the ball through Hawkeye. But this one's quite a good one, because when you look at that one, you pretty much say, well, um, in the old rule, that ball is definitely out. But when you look at this, you look at the ball rolling across there and its contact, you can see that if you don't watch it, if you watch it all the way, you get that impression the ball has moved on and it's out. And this is another one. This is Hernan, an Argentinian referee here, who's determined that he's looking down on that ball, so he cannot judge that. So that's why he's asked, can somebody tell me, is that in or out? I can't judge that. It's right below. And again, here's a cross-court ball, and as you can see, in this one the ball is out. Yeah, but it's really close to the line, and therefore the referee is looking for some support. Now, here you can see that the players are very quick to ask Fabrizio to look at this one again. As you can see, it's going to be close. As a first referee, you're probably going to be looking at that, and all you're going to see is that ball roll on, and you'll get that point at which it's leaving the floor, and you can see the line, and therefore you could be pulled into that thinking that ball is out when it's actually in. That's all the point I'm trying to make on that. But you can see what I mean about tracking the ball across and trying to get to that decision point. So therefore, players now have to understand that ball in, ball out, the court is now much wider than it ever was. Okay, so here's another one that looks at first glance as definitely out, but let's have a look at it. So this is Turkey, and this is Kakaka, I think, playing down the line, and she's hit effectively the corner. So both line judges, if you were having 4 line judges, would be making a decision for you now. This is in the Nations League, so there are only 2 line judges, and the line judge at the far end, who stood in the middle, as you can see, has not made a decision on that ball. It is not a decision that she's going to make. So therefore, the referee's gone with the ball as being in, and Korea have challenged to say it's ball out. And as you can see, it couldn't get any more or any closer to that corner. I always think that when I look at this, that Evgeny there looks a little confused by what he's seeing on his screen, but clearly he's been given the right information. Okay, so ball in signals. Now we all know this. We know it's ball diagram 14, and we know what our line judge is doing. But one thing I would say about this is be consistent with where you signal ball in. You don't point at the ball or where it landed. Point at the same spot. Now, personally, my arm points to the 3-meter line, a few meters in from the court, and I point to the same spot every single time. So in the same way that the line judge, if you're looking at one line, you flag that the ball is in on the line you're looking at. So if you are line judges 1 and 3, then you are signaling your sideline that the ball is in on my sideline, not that the ball is in close to another line, but the ball is in on that sideline. And if you are line judge 2 and 4, then you're saying the ball is in on my end line. And you signal your end line to say the ball is in on this line. And that obviously, if you have 4 line judges, you can sometimes get a difference of opinion. Okay, so one of them will be saying the ball is in on my line, and one of the other line judges will say yes, but it's out on my line. And if you do get that situation, then you just need to make sure that you take the right information, because obviously, and make your judgment. I have had that situation whereby I've had a ball on an end line, which was signalled in by the line judge number 4, and helpfully line judge number 3 signalled the ball out. They were briefed beforehand to say, look, just one of you, stick to your own line, but that was the way they've been trained, and it was difficult for them to get out of that. So in that situation, to stop there being a riot on the court, the easiest thing for me to do was to call both line judges to me and have a chat. Now, in the end, the ball was out. I thought it was out, and the line judge that gave the ball in admitted that it was a reaction and he was probably wrong. Well, that was good enough for me to say that he was wrong, so we went with out. But if you should tell the line judges to just signal the line in, and signal all balls that land in the court as in, not just the ones that are anywhere near the line, or the ones where if the referee can't see that's in, I'm not going to signal it. Just signal it. It makes sure that they're watching every single play to be signalling, and the players then know, well, that line judge is paying attention. They're signalling everything. So therefore, I've got every confidence that when it's a tight call, that line judge is paying attention, and their call will be the best call they can make given the information they've got. It just adds to your referee call being trusted by the players. Okay, so ball in, there's one area which is a bit more tricky for us, and that is the pancake. So if we remember the wording, the ball is in if at any moment some part of the ball touches the court. We shouldn't be too quick to judge the ball is down or the ball is in with a pancake play, because the play itself can be spectacular. So therefore, if you have a crowd and you stop play for too quickly or for no apparent reason for their perspective, then you have to be certain the ball has touched the court. Now, on the opposite side of that, the players will always claim that they stopped the ball contacting the floor because they managed to get any part of their hand under the ball. So they might have got just one finger under the ball and claim that that stops it touching the floor. Now, we know, we've seen the compression video, so we know that in order to stop the ball compressing around the hand onto the floor, it's got to hit the hand somewhere between the knuckles and around the knuckle sort of area. Because if it doesn't, then the ball is going to compress around the hand onto the floor. Now, you may decide that you're going to let that go anyway. But if a player only gets, say, their fingertips under the ball, then clearly the ball is going to contact the floor. Okay, so I'm saying with the pancake is don't judge it too quickly, but listen, look what you've got. Does the player actually get under the ball? How does the ball behave? So if the player's got their hand under the ball will show that the ball has changed in the way it comes off the hand. You'll get a sound. You know what the ball sounds like when it hits the floor. It'll be slightly different. So you've got various things that can help you in this. But also remember that when you're looking down on the ball, you can't see the hand underneath it. Okay, and therefore one of the things here is the first referee should use the line judges and the second referee in this instance. Quickly look at your line judges. Have they seen the ball down? Because one of them might be signalling for you, because they have a different angle. The other thing is that the second referee has the responsibility within their rules 24.326 to signal the contact of the ball with the floor when the first referee is not in a position to see the contact. So therefore you can take that responsibility if you clearly see the ball hit the floor. Okay, and that's what I mean. So we're going to have a look now at some pancakes and to show you how tricky it is to get this right. All of these have got challenge on them, I think. So we might move it on. Okay, down. Okay, so this one, let's just go back. Just have it, if I can get it back before the player. Just look at how the ball reacts after he says he's got. Yeah, can you see the way the ball has got backspin on it? Okay, because of the way there's a hand. So there is a challenge from Brazil to say that ball is down. You can see that they're actually talking about it. So I think they're pretty comfortable that the player did not get his hand onto the ball. The player doesn't look convinced. So then he's just allowing things to calm down. Denis Cespedes, the referee from Dominica, just allowing things to calm down. They all know. They know it's on challenge, so they can wait for the decision. So let's see if we can speed this up. Okay, so as you can see, the player was nowhere near the ball. Okay, so let's just bring that back if we can. As you can see, just bring it back. You can see that the player was quite late, and because of that, you've got this sort of half volley type response of the ball with the backspin of the ball.
Nick, we had a comment on Pancake actually, just while the video was playing, from Nacho. And Nacho was asking, so how does and this wasn't on this particular video, but just in general.
So this is Iran, Serbia.
Oh, I'll ask it after this one. I'll leave it 1 second.
Okay, so on that one, okay. Now, unfortunately, our Canadian referee there has been probably slightly too quick in his decision making. The ball has been given down. Serbia are quite happy with that, obviously. Iran are pretty certain that the player got it, and you can see the way the ball reacted off the hand. It was almost like a rebound. It was a bounce, which suggested the hand was firmly on the ground underneath it, and the ball bounced as though it was coming off a solid surface. Okay, and I suspect in this case Serbia quite understand that ball was not down. So let's see if we can move it on to the decision. Somewhere up here. Right, okay, here we come. They'll move the graphic out of the way in a second so you can see it. Okay. So in that case, you can see that the player actually was clearly under the ball, and because the play was stopped in that situation, this has to be a replay. Okay, and the reason it's a replay is because the original decision was ball in. There wasn't an ending to the rally, so there is no alternative decision here to make for the referee. The rally should have continued, and therefore this must be a replay. It's not the same as when you've got a ball in or out, because you've got an in or you've got an out on a line. I mean, because there you've got a decision either way. It's either in or it's going to be out. Ball touched, it's either touched or it's not. So you've got an alternative, but with this one with ball down, you've got to go to replay, unfortunately. Okay, and this is a much quicker one to look. Okay, this is again, you can see here the player has not got underneath the ball, its fingertips. Let's get this started again, see if I can stop it. Okay, we'll stop it there. And we can see that the player's hand is barely got underneath. Now, when this is going in full motion, because this is obviously a really slowed down challenge system review of this particular ball, but this angle clearly shows that the player has not got there. Okay, the ball is down. Now, the second referee, who is going to be over here at the side is looking at that. They can't see the hand behind the ball. They can't see that. And the first referee looking down on that, they may say, well, I know the hand was close. I don't know whether it was underneath it or not. So again, that's one where perhaps play would have been allowed to continue, but quite clearly you can see that the player is nowhere, is not there, and is not going to get there either. Okay, so you need to do that. And again, you can see that when the ball contacts the player, the ball is starting to backspin. It's got that little bit of, it's come up against the hand and it's now showing some backspin, whereas if she'd got underneath it, it would have rebounded off without that backspin. Okay. Not always the case, but that's one other thing to kind of look at. Okay. Just what's this example? This is Russia. Yes. Okay. So now you might look at this, and Denny's very quick to calm everyone down and say, I want somebody to look at that. Did the ball contact the floor, which everyone thinks it did? This is not a pancake situation. This is a player who doesn't know whether the ball's hit the floor. All he's felt is the ball's hit his foot, and therefore the ball is up. But I think that on first view, my personal view was that that was definitely hitting the ground because of the way the ball came off the player. There was almost like it bounced off the player. And if you look at it again, you can see that the ball has contacted the floor just before the foot. So good decision. But in that situation, the referee has calmed all of the players down very quickly, saying, look, calm down, we can have a look at this. Okay, so let's get to ball out then. So Rule 8.4 says that the ball is out, and it gives a number of ways the ball is out. The ball is out when part of the ball contacting the floor, all parts of the ball, sorry, contacting the floor are completely outside the boundary lines, and we talked about this just now. It touches an object outside the court, the ceiling, or a person out of play. It touches the antennae, ropes, posts, or the net itself outside the sidebands. It crosses the vertical plane of the net either partially or totally outside the crossing space, except in the case of Rule 10.1.2. And I think you'll remember that when we looked at Rule 9, Rule 10.1.2 was an exception there as well. And also out if it crosses completely the lower space under the net. So we've got two signals that we can use. We can use diagram 15, ball out, or diagram 22, ball out. So diagram 22 is specifically for the ball crossing the lower space, completely the lower space under the net. But on the line judge side, we've got a couple of differences here. We have the standard ball out, which is the vertical held flag, or for an outside object or not crossing coming through the crossing space, we have the wave and point. Okay, and these are and also the wave and point. There are some nuances within that, so let's consider all of these in turn. So the first one, 8.4.1, says the ball is out when all parts of the ball which contact the floor are completely outside the boundary lines. Okay, so we've already seen this, that a ball over the line but not touching it is out. But take care when the ball compresses, because the ball may flatten itself considerably, as we've seen, and the ball is travelling really fast. So a line judge that tracks the ball, and these are from the guidelines. This is when you're talking about tracking the ball. If you track the ball, you'll be late at the contact point, and therefore the tendency is to estimate the ball is out because it has moved on. It's moved further outside the court. Okay, then when you make the decision. So that was a relatively straightforward part of it. So 8.4.2, the ball is out when it touches an object outside the court, the ceiling, or a person out of play. Okay, so before the match, as first referees, we have a responsibility to check the playing area. And part of this check, Rule 1.1, says that the free playing space is the space above the playing area which is free from any obstructions. And that space should be a minimum of 7 meters from the playing surface. And this is something you need to check. You need to look up. You need to look at what's hanging from the ceiling, what's overhanging your free playing area. What could cause you a problem at some point during the match if you haven't dealt with it beforehand in discussions with the operator of the hall or the captains or the coaches. So you should note any obstructions that might come into play. Odd cables hanging from ceilings and things. You might find that when you're, and this is specifically to the sports halls that we tend to get ourselves refereeing in, that sometimes attachments to the rules are hanging over the free playing space, like badminton nets, that sort of thing. But also consider what it means when it says a person out of play. And people out of play are those people that have a right to be in the free zone. Okay, so that's your second referee, your line judge is the coach. Okay, and if the ball hits a referee or a coach, the line judge should not be using wave and point. Okay, the line judge in that instance must use out. Okay, and not wave and point. And as a referee, you know that a ball which is touched and hits the coach, the signal is out and not ball touched, because the coach is a person out of play in the free zone. Anybody else shouldn't be there. Okay, so you have to make sure that you know who is where. And within some of our sports halls, you have to know that players warming up, for example, if they have encroached the free zone, then and the ball hits them, they are out of play. They are outside the free zone. Okay, they're not in it because the warming up area is outside the free zone. So you have to know where people are and what you are constituting to be your free zone and your playing area. Okay, so let's have a look at this one. If I can work out which one it is. I think this is a camera. So watch the ball and it hits the camera boom at the back of the court. Okay, so luckily, I don't think there are any sports halls that we're going to have to worry about camera booms, but in this instance, the camera boom should not have been in the free playing space, and therefore, in this instance, it's a replay. Okay, replay the point. It is not a fault. Okay, because the object has come into the free playing space, so it's not something that should be you're going to take as being a ball out situation. Okay, so 8.4.3 says that it's also out when it touches the antenna, the ropes, the post, or the net itself. Now the guidelines go on to say that the cables binding the net beyond the 9.5-10 meter length do not belong to the net. Okay, this also applies to the posts and the cables. So thus, if a ball touches an external part of the net beyond the side bands at 9 meters, it has touched a foreign object and should be whistled and signalled by both referees as ball out. And the line judges use the wave and point signal. Okay, and I think we all know that. Now, within this one, we have the net and the side bands, and we know that a ball that hits the side band may be retrieved from the net. Okay, but if the ball hits the antenna at the same time it hits the side band, then it is out. The antenna at this point is in the sheath. It may be in the sheath, and you can't see it, but it is a rigid part of the net. and therefore you have to be careful that just because the ball has hit the sideband doesn't mean that it is still in play. Quite often, if you think about it, when we look at a ball, for the ball to hit the sideband and still be legal, i.e. not having hit the antenna, the sideband is 5 centimetres, the same as any other line on the court. So that 5 centimetres before it gets the antenna, that's all it can hit. So you've got only a small part of the ball that can hit the sideband. If the whole ball hits the sideband right in the middle of the ball, it's hit the antenna, it's out. Okay, it doesn't change just because you can't see the antenna at this point. Okay, if the ball goes, and also make note here that if the ball goes through the space between the end of the net and the post and doesn't hit any courts, then it is still in play. It has to actually hit it. It's not just a case of it's gone through a part of the net. If it doesn't hit it, it's still in play. Although I have never seen a ball that goes through this area be continued to being retrieved. So it's pretty much going to be out at that point anyway. But just so that you're aware, it's not quite out yet until it lands. Okay. Here's an example of the ball hitting the antenna. It comes off the block. Okay, now this ball's been given in, but you can clearly see that the ball has changed direction, and the only thing that can change its direction is the antenna. So in this instance, let's play it again. In this instance, the ball is clearly out, and as second referees, we've got to be able to be alert to this one, okay? Because this could be a second referee decision, quite capable of making that decision. It's on your side of the court. You've got new responsibilities allowing you to call much more of the ball out on your side of the court around the post. So you need to look at the line judges. If you're not sure and you think the ball has changed direction, but the line judge is giving you no help, your second referee may not have given you any help, or a second referee you weren't sure because you were on the block side and it hit the other side. Go and talk to the line judge, or first referee, call the line judge to you and talk to them. Find out, has anyone seen this ball change direction? If the ball has changed direction, in that case the ball was going out, it hit the antenna and it was landed in. So, you know, the ball is out as soon as it hits the antenna. So you need to be conscious of this. Just one last time. So this decision of ball in this case is not correct. That ball is out. Okay, 8.4.4, the ball is out when it crosses the vertical plane of the net, either partially or totally outside the crossing space, except in the case of our good old friend, Rule 10.1.2. And I suspect after these sessions, if you don't know Rule 10.1.2, then it will be one of the rules that you can quote verbatim, I would imagine. Okay, so as Rule 2.4 tells us, the antenna are considered part of the net and laterally delimit the crossing space. And the crossing space is the narrowest part of the playing space. So on the floor, we talked about it earlier, we've got a 9-meter wide court. Okay. Now we know with compression, as we talked about it, that we've probably got another 8 or 9, maybe 8 centimeters between the center of the ball and how much of the ball compresses on each side of the ball. So you've got about maybe an 18 centimeter space of compression. So therefore the court is actually that 8 centimeters wider each side, because the ball can hit the ground 8 centimeters outside the line and probably still hit the line. Okay, so the court at that point is at its widest. It's about 9.15 odd meters wide. Now in the crossing space, and apologies for why 78 has appeared in the text there. If it's after the third team hit, and this is talking after the third team hit. So this is an attack hit. There isn't going to be no retrieval under 10.1.2, which we'll get to in a minute. The ball has got to be able to pass between the antenna, not touch them, and it cannot pass over the top of the antenna. So at this point, the court is at its narrowest over the net, because the ball has got to be able to get through the gap without the antenna. So if you think the centre of the ball on the ground could be up to 8 centimetres outside the court, so in this instance the ball has actually got to be a good 8 to 10 centimetres inside the antenna in order to get the whole ball past the antenna without touching. So at this point, you know, the space that the ball can get through is much narrower. Okay. We also talked about an exception for Rule 10.1.2, and we're going to look at that next. But we'll just finish off with the lower space first before we get that. Look at that. The ball is out when it crosses completely the lower space under the net, and the key point here again is the word completely. Cannot stress it enough. Completely. Okay. When we talk 10.1.3, which we'll get to again in a minute, and this is why these two rules are quite closely linked. The ball that's heading towards the opponent's court through the lower space is in play until the moment it has completely crossed the vertical plane of the net. Okay, so completely, again, it means that partial ball across does not mean that that is out, so it can still be retrieved at this point. So one thing you have to consider with this is that in order for a player to retrieve a ball which is partially crossed the lower space under the net, they will have to contact the ball in the opponent's space. And we know that at the top of the net, contacting the ball in the opponent's space when you're not blocking is a fault. But in the lower space, it is not a fault. Okay? So referees should ensure that if the ball goes through the crossing the lower space under the net and it's out, then you use signal 22 and you point to the line. And I mean point, you don't paint, none of this waving your hand up and down or whatever. It's a point. You're pointing at the line. It's the same as when a server touches the end line. You point to the end line, not the length of it. I point somewhere on it, somewhere over there. Players will know what you're talking about. You just point. It's the only time when, as a referee, you actually point. But as I say, you don't paint. So when we're looking at around the net and the crossing space, we can see that anything that is in black is a fault, except Rule 10.1.2, and anything which is or white ball here is legal. However, I again say except 10.1.2, and we'll determine why that is in a minute. Okay, so this tells us what sort of things we're looking at and which balls are out when they're crossing the crossing space in the net. So rule 8.4, a ball out and the second referee. Second referees must be aware that changes to your responsibilities in respect of 8.4 and your work in practice. Okay. Rule 24, which is second referee, says during the match he or she decides whistles and signals the contact with the ball with an outside object. Normally with the ceiling, first referee does it. So not really any need for the second referee to do it, but second referee can do it. It's within your right and responsibility, and the first referee may even expect you to. The contact of the ball with the floor when the first referee is not in a position to see the contact, and only in that situation. And the ball that crosses the net plane totally or partially outside of the crossing space to the opponent's court, or contacts the antenna on his or her side of the court. So this is pretty much anything on your side of the court as a second referee that hits the post, hits or post play, passes outside the antenna, goes out. As soon as it passes outside the antenna, you can signal out and you would maybe expected to by your first referee. And also you now can signal the served ball and the third hit passing over or outside the antenna on your side of the court as out as well. Okay, but in a lot of situations you wouldn't. So if the ball has gone through the crossing space, then you're not signaling it out. If it's outside the crossing space, then you can, as long as you take the right choice of doing it and knowing that it's the third hit or it's a served ball and it's past you, then you can signal that ball out. And I say your first referee may expect you to do this. Now, one thing to remember when you're going to signal out is that if the ball, let's say an attacker, you're an attacker and you've got a block. Now you're going to be with the block. The attacker hits the ball and it hits the antenna. So in order for you to signal it out, you're now on the wrong side of the net. So you need to change sides and whistle out, then signal, and then the first referee knows, because of your position, which way the ball's going. If you whistle and signal out, the referee, and don't move, the referee will think that the ball has contacted the antenna off the block. So you need to be careful. Now, if you don't know whether the block has touched the ball first or it's straight off the attack hit, again, use your line judges. Talk to the referee. They have a different view. They may be able to help you. Okay, so it's just one of the things. If you've got a doubt, players will take confidence that you're trying to get the right decision. Now, the first referee, if you see if the ball hits the post on the second referee's side, for example, most common case of this, you've got to give the second referee the opportunity to whistle these faults within their responsibility. Just because you've seen it doesn't mean to say that you should try and get there first. Let the second referee have that moment to actually get this into their working practice. But the second referee must also know that your movement around the post, you've got to have the best view. And it's always a note that goes down on evaluations at international level that says referee must be in the best optical position to see. And what they're meaning is that your position around the post must be so that you can see the net fault contacts, which is your primary responsibility, but also see the faults of ball out or blocking faults around the antenna, and be able to get those faults correct. As I say, if either of you are unsure as to which team last contacted the ball, consult your line judges. Now, just as a reminder, if the second referee whistles the fault, then the second referee initially indicates the side of the fault, well, after they've got to the right side of the net, the nature of the fault, the player at fault if necessary, and then the team to serve following the signal of the first referee. The first referee does not show the fault in this case. Okay. Only the team to serve. And the first referee will only know which team to serve by the position of the second referee. So look here, this is London, and this is the now retired great, I think it's Akihiko Tano. Here, this is the final, I think. So it's Tano, our second referee, and this is what I mean about great positioning and moving around so that you know where you are and you can see everything. Just watch how Tano moves. Okay, so he knows where the ball is. He's moved back so he can see it. He now knows the ball's behind him, so he's turned round. He's moved to the post so that he can see whether the ball goes back inside. He can see the blocker because he's turned at the right moment to see the blocker. Again, he's moved out of the way of the player chasing the ball. Okay, so this is 10.1.2 in action if Bruno had managed to recover that ball, which we'll obviously get to in a minute. Okay, so again, look where Tano is. He's watching all the time as to he can see the ball. He knows where he is. He's not sort of service, oh, all I have to do is get to the block. He's now saying, okay, I've done that, but I know that I'm in the way now. I have to get out of the way. Let's move. Okay, so ball crossing the net. Rule 10. So rule 10 says the ball sent to the opponent's court must go over the net within the crossing space. And the crossing space is the space part of the vertical plane of the net, limited by below, by the top of the net, the sides by the antenna and their imaginary extension to the ceiling, and above by the ceiling. Okay, and this is a definition, and this is one of the definitions in volleyball that you would be expected to know. If somebody said to you, what's the crossing space? You would expect you to be able to say, it's the part of the vertical plane of the net delimited by the at the bottom by the top of the net, at the sides by the antenna and their imaginary extension, and above by the ceiling. 10.1.2. Okay, our old friend 10.1.2, recovering the ball from the opponent's free zone. The ball that has crossed the net plane to the opponent's free zone totally or partly through the external space may be played back within the team hits, provided that the opponent's court is not touched by a player, i.e. there's no penetration fault, and the ball, when played back, crosses the net plane again totally or partly through the external space on the same side of the court. The opponent team may not prevent such action. So as a referee, you must be aware of players chasing balls which they cannot legally play back within the confines of this rule. So, for example, the second ball is shanked over or partly outside crossing space. There's no point, unless the player knows something about the rules of physics, that you can get the ball played from the opponent's free zone back outside through the external space and then back through the crossing space off a second ball, unless you know something I don't. So as a referee, just be careful where players get too exuberant and do chase these balls, or chase balls that have gone through the crossing space and are going to go out, because this players in the opponent court or the opponent free zone can all easily cause problems for you, particularly if they run into players or they do something stupid whilst they're there. Just make sure that they know, don't chase these balls unless you know that you can play it back legally. So when we are talking about which balls can be chased, so both referees, as referees and second referees as well, you must make sure that if you know that it's the first, and this is only the first pass really, if the first pass goes over or partly through the external space, it can be retrieved. So be aware of that. So when you're second referee looking at the reception of the service, don't automatically move without looking about where the ball's gone, because the ball could be coming straight at you. Because in that instance, you've got to get out of the way, and the most obvious way, as Tano clearly showed to us, was to get to the post and use the post as the barrier, so that the player if they're going to run into anything, they're running into the post and they're not running into you. Because if they run into you as a second referee, then they've got a case for complaining to the first referee that there should be a replay, and in that instance. So in this case, and also as second referee and line judges should not signal this ball out until they know the ball is out. And there are two obviously clear cases about when it is out. So if we look at these balls, so look at one, the ball marked 1 in red. Okay, that's come from the passer and it's gone through the crossing space. A player has chased it, you assume by not touching the opponent court, into the opponent's free zone, and that ball becomes out as soon as the chasing player contacts the ball, because it's a ball that cannot be chased. It's gone through the crossing space. It would be out if it was not played again. Okay, so in that case, that is out as soon as the player touches it. Cases 2 and 3. Now these are two cases where the ball has come outside through the external space. A player can chase it, but in both instances the ball has not gone back through the external space. It's gone back, or it's heading back towards the crossing space, and as soon as the ball crosses the sideline, that is the point at which you signal the ball out. For plays number 4 and number 5, both of these are legal. Okay, the ball has gone partially or fully through the external space and has been passed back partially or fully through the external space, and that ball can still be played as long as, obviously with 3 team hits, it would be the third hit, and therefore would have to be an attack hit. Okay, so in Rule 9, we were told that the team must play in its own playing area and space, except Rule 10.1.2. And it goes on to say the ball may be retrieved from beyond its own free zone. 10.1.2 then gives the players the right to recover the ball from the opponent's free zone, but it doesn't allow the ball to be retrieved from outside the opponent's free zone. There is one exception, and that's the scorer's table. And the scorer might not be that comfortable with a player diving over the scorer's table to retrieve a ball, particularly if they're using a laptop, or their nice pristine score sheet, which is now scrumpled up, ball on the floor with a sweaty player on top of it. But the ball can be retrieved from behind the scorer's table or over the scorer's table. I've not seen it happen very often. I was trying to find a clip of Verbov, I think the Russian libero, doing this in one match, but I couldn't find it in time. Okay, so when the player is chasing a ball, then players and coaches must recognise that practically, and they must make the appropriate movement in their own free zone to give the player the space needed to play the ball. Now, we'll look at this a lot more when we look at interference in Rule 11, so I'm not going to dwell on it for a long time, because we could be here for a long time, and I expect we could spend a whole night talking about interference. So we're going to do that. We're going to have a night talking about interference. What am I talking about? Now, we saw this last time, those of you that were with us. This is the USA. Hopefully it's the right part in the video, of a player retrieving the ball from the opponent's free zone. It's the next clip, I think. No, it's not. I've missed it. Let's go back a bit. Yeah. Okay. So it's coming up now. Okay. So the ball has gone outside the antenna. It's played back outside the antenna, and then the play can continue. Okay, so in that case, that was a clear time about when this can happen. Okay, so let's have a look at a situation whereby a player, in this case, this is a very famous situation. This is when the Serbian coach, Nikola Gribic, does not give the German player the opportunity to chase the ball. Okay, so he's just caught it, and Campo is telling him, well, that ball was outside the crossing space, so therefore you had to get out of the way, I'm afraid, my friend, and let me play it. So that is interference. That is a clear case of interference. Okay, because Germany had the right to play that ball. Okay, now we will look at this, as I say, as I'm not going to dwell on it here, but there are lots of cases of players kind of trying to interfere and maybe not interfering. So we'll cover those situations when we get to it. And as you'll note from, and I think Rita wanted to know this, that there is no signal for this fault of interference. Okay, the first referee simply shows the side out and informs the players that their decision was it's interference. You don't have a signal there. You're just going to have to communicate what has happened and deal with it. Okay, as best you can. Have I come off screen share?
Yes,
Sorry.
It's just got the money off the screen at the moment.
Let's try and get back on.
There we go.
Now, this is a case of this is interference. This is perhaps, let's say, this is more on the stupidity side of retrieving a ball from the opponent's space. Okay, so the player was still in the opponent's free zone when the ball came off the block and hit him, and therefore, unfortunately, he causes the fault. So have a look at it again. Okay, so correctly plays the ball back and then is still there when the ball comes off the block and hits him. So unfortunate, but there we are. Okay, 10.1.3, the lower space. Okay, so the ball that's heading towards the opponent court through the lower space is in play until the moment it has completely crossed the vertical plane of the net. Okay, so we talked about this earlier, but let's consider these situations, and let's have some responses then. So let's open these up to everyone to respond. So in this situation, the ball hits an opponent player without completely crossing the net plane. So this is a player on the opponent player on the other side of the net. The ball has gone towards the lower space and it hits them, but doesn't actually cross the net plane. Okay, so anybody got any thoughts on that one?
Tim, you're more than welcome to unmute yourself and answer.
I would call it as going under the net, because if the player hadn't been there, it would have gone under the net. So it's irrelevant, the fact that the player would hit the player.
That's Tim. Thanks, Tim.
Yeah.
Absolutely, it's as simple as that. Doesn't matter. It's hit the opponent player, and because it's hit the opponent player, it's out. Okay, so the next one, the player from the team last contacting the ball retrieves the ball that has not completely crossed the net plane by hitting the ball in the opponent's playing space. So this is underneath the net.
If you'd like to share your thoughts, you're more than welcome to either put your hand up, or if you want to, you can also drop a comment in the chat. Lud, would you like to share your thoughts?
Well, it's perfectly playable as long as it's not the third contact.
Absolutely. Thanks, Ludo. So yeah, we mentioned it briefly earlier, that this is the only time when a player may play the ball in the opponent's space, apart from a block, legally, is that's to retrieve a ball which has not completely crossed the vertical plane of the net in the lower space. Okay. So a ball coming from a legal block in the opponent's space hits the blocker again before contacting the floor. So the blocker has got over, they've contacted the ball above the net, it's gone straight down, and then it's hit them again before it's hit the floor. What do we think on that situation?
Nacho, the floor is yours.
I guess that's just a ball in.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, simple. Just because it's hit the block again doesn't make any difference. It's come down the side, down in the opponent's side of the net, and it's hit the block before it's where it would have normally hit the floor. That's just why it just happens. Okay, so that's ball in. Another one on a similar line, so ball coming from a legal block in the opponent's space lands on the court of the side of the blocker, having come down the net on the opponent's side. So it's come down the opponent's side and has gone through the lower space and hit the court of the blocker. Anything to say on that one?
No volunteers as of yet, Nick, unless you wanted to pick on anyone. Oh, there we go. Tim, would you like to jump in first? I think your hand was first up there.
Not often I get ahead of Ludwig. I would just say the fact that it's gone through the downs of the bottom zone, so it would have been against the opponents. It came from their side.
Yeah, so you're saying point to the blocker, yeah?
Yeah, point to the blocker.
Absolutely correct. It doesn't make any difference as to, you know, in those situations you just applaud the block if they can manage to do that. When we come to look at blocking, there is a video that shows that situation actually occurring in a match, so we'll look at it then. But I just thought that when we're talking about lower space, don't think that the lower space changes anything in terms of whether the ball hits players under this in that area. If the ball is going to go through the lower space and hits an opponent, then it's out. If it is played by the blocker straight down and it happens to either hit the blocker again or go through the lower space, then that ball is in, and it will just cause problems if you try and judge it any differently. Okay, so just the last couple of bits of 10.2 and 3, and then I've got a few questions. So while crossing the net, the ball may touch it. Now, the older generation will remember that with service, until I think about 2000, the served ball was not allowed to touch the net as it crossed. But obviously now you just need to know that the ball crossing the net may touch it. And a ball driven into the net may be recovered within the limits of the 3 team hits. And this again we'll come back to when we talk about interference, because there is a situation with player contact with the net that is linked to this particular part of this rule. And then the final one about if the ball rips the mesh of the net or tears it down, a rally is cancelled and replayed. I suspect that's been in the rules ever since maybe 1896. And I doubt whether it has happened in the last 50 years or so, but it could do somewhere, so we shall see. Okay, but in these situations, be clear as a first referee when you're going to whistle a fault. Okay, when the ball hits the net from a serve and it's not going to cross the vertical net plane, then you whistle as soon as you are clear the ball is not going to cross. You don't have to wait for it to hit the ground or hit a player or anything. As soon as you know it's not going to cross the net, you whistle the service as a fault. And a ball from the first and second hit hits the net and falls on the side of the same team. And in that instance, you just have to make sure that you do not do anything, just do nothing, okay, because you know the ball can be recovered from that situation. Okay, and then the third situation is the third team hit, and then the first referee must only whistle when the fault actually occurs. So if the ball hits the net and it's going to come back on the side of the attacker, you wait to find out what fault is going to occur, and most likely it will be ball in, it could be ball out, it could be ball out in the lower space, it could be ball touched, it could be 4 hits, it could be double contact, i.e. the player that attacked it plays it again. And you may need to indicate the player as necessary, but only whistle when the fault occurs, not just that the ball has hit the net and it's not going to go over. And one of the things that you do before the start of the match, I hope, in your checking, is that one of your checks is to use a ball and throw it at the net to see how it rebounds off the net. Because what you don't want to do is the ball being hit into the net and the net giving way so that the ball drops vertically, and because the net's given away, the ball is dropping vertically straight into the opponent's court. So therefore it will be out, but having passed through the lower space. If you test the net for its how it rebounds, then beforehand, and get it relatively tight, then the players know that if the ball goes into the net, they have plenty of opportunity to play it. What you want to do is try and avoid nets that have got too much spring in them and things like that, but generally test the net. Just make sure that the ball will rebound off of it, or if it hits the top band and comes down the net, when it hits the band at the bottom of the net, it should just spring out from the net slightly. Just check that that is happening so that players can recover the ball from the net, and that would be really useful. Okay, so time for some questions for you now, okay, based on these rules. Okay, so you're doing your pre-match checks and you've identified that a basketball hoop overhangs the service zone. You mention it to the captains before the toss. A server forgets this, and in tossing the ball for service, the ball hits the hoop. What do you do?
Lud, what would you do?
I would award the point to the other side because he's had his service attempt and it didn't work.
Okay, so taking that on one step further, the player throws the ball up, it hits the hoop, and then the player then serves the ball. Sorry, excuse me, the phone's going here.
In that case, should be ball is out because it's an external object.
So I will.
No, it's not in play until the ball is served, is it?
No, correct. The ball is not in play. So how can the
manage to recover and hit the ball? Then it's fine.
That is my view. My view would be I'd allow that to go. But one thing you can do before the toss, when you're doing the toss, is say to the captains, "Look, guys, that basketball hoop overhangs. Okay, this is how I'm going to treat it if the ball hits it. Yeah. So if a server throws the ball up and it hits it, that's their stupidity. They should have checked above them before they did it. But they can still attempt to serve because the ball is not in play. If the ball is in play and it hits it, then I'm going to class it as an outside object, and therefore it's out. Just tell them this is how I'm going to deal with it. But my view is, and the rules don't cover it, and I've never seen anybody cover it. I've seen it happen in an international match with something was in the ceiling. It was about it was above 7 meters. The player threw the ball so high that it hit what was in the ceiling, and the player was just watched the ball come down and didn't attempt to hit it. So at that point, it's obviously a service attempt, and therefore wasn't was point away. But in those instances, yeah, just if the player makes an effort at the service, let play continue. But in those instances, you've done your checks beforehand. Make sure that you've talked to the players so they know how you're going to treat it. There's a case in at one of the halls down in the south that Ludo and I know very well. Has a metal cord hanging from the ceiling, and it's only on one side of it's only on one of the courts, over one of the courts. And because it's just a metal cord and it's not going to change the trajectory of the ball, we just tell the players if it hits that, we're carrying on. Okay, and that's just we just make that choice beforehand. So next one then, a player chases the ball into their own free zone, and in stopping the ball hitting a wall, they place their hand on the wall, the ball hits their hand and rebounds so the team can continue the rally. What do we think on that one?
Naturally, I saw you had a hand up. If it was to do with the previous question, we could probably come back to that. But what if not? What would you do, or what would anybody else do in that circumstance? Rita, would you like to answer?
I would say they were taking assistance from an external object, so it's a foul.
Okay.
If they just played it off the hand, fine. The fact the hand was on the wall, they're taking assistance from that wall, in effect, to give them the rebound.
Yeah.
There's a little quiet there, sorry, Rita. But was it
Yeah.
you're taking assistance from the wall? That was what you were saying.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it makes it. Rita, I'm inclined to agree with you. I do think that it's a bit of a tricky one because if the player is making an attempt to hit the ball, then I'd let it go. But if they actually just place their hand on the wall, so the ball rebounds and the wall is being used to actually make the ball rebound more, then perhaps they are taking assistance from it, and I would call it a fault. But it's one of those ones where you see players run towards the walls and stick their hands up against the wall, and you just wonder, well, if play continued from this situation, which most times it doesn't, how am I going to react when the other team complains? And in that situation, yeah, you're the first referee, you have the golden rule at your disposal, which is that you can decide on all matters which are not specifically covered in the rules, and in that case you make a decision. Up to you which way you do it, and as long as you're plausible in your explanation, then do so. I just thought I'd put it in here because I'd be interested to see what people thought.
Lod's got his hand up there.
Yeah, somebody else. Yeah, happy to take a discussion on it. It's no problem.
Isn't the wall outside the playing zone? Therefore, you can't have an assisted hit if you're outside the playing zone.
Yeah, this is a good one. Yeah, so the wall actually delimits your free playing area. Absolutely.
So if it's behind the team bench, for example, then it's obviously outside the.
Yeah, so it's behind the team bench, and you could just say, well, okay, that's spectacular play if you wanted to class it as that, but it's up to you how you see it. And I just thought that some of our sports halls are very close. The court is very close, and the balls do hit the walls, and players have the opportunity to try and get their bodies or hands between the ball and the wall. And I just wondered how you saw that situation and how you might deal with it. I'm not suggesting there's a right or wrong answer here, by the way. I'm just saying that use your judgment, be plausible, sell your decision. Okay, a player sat on the team bench steps off the bench into the free zone and catches a ball coming from the opponent's third hit before it lands.
Nacho, would you like to unmute yourself and consider what you would do in that situation?
I would give them the point because the ball was going to go out anyway. So his action doesn't change anything.
Yeah. Yeah. Would you do anything else?
Or maybe tell him to let the ball bounce in the future.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right in that situation. If the player was, for example, still on the bench, then the bench is outside the free zone, so the ball is out because it's going to be outside the free zone on the opponent's side. If that was the first hit, would you take a different view? So if a player was running round and a player sat on the team bench, stepped off the bench and caught the ball, would you take a different view?
If it was after the first hit, I guess it depends if someone else was trying to retrieve the ball.
Yep. So let's say they were.
In that case, I would tell them to not interfere with the play, basically.
Yeah. So you would class that as interference.
Yeah.
And would you make a judgment as to whether you thought the player could have reached the ball, or would you take that into consideration?
Yes. Although, I mean, that's a tricky one because it depends if he had any real chances of getting to the ball. But in any case, if there was a player trying to catch the ball, to chase the ball, I should at least tell them, well, do not interfere with the game because they were trying to retrieve it. They're in the right to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. And I think if we think back to that Gribic and Camper incident, if Camper was not going to be able to play that ball, then Gribic was probably okay to catch it. But it's just simply that Camper was stood next to him at the time he caught it, and therefore, because of that proximity, he was interfering. I just wonder if Camper wasn't quite there, whether the referees would have taken a different view. But as I say, we will look at interference at the next. Let's look at it next time, so that we can cover it as it's a natural step on from this session.
So this one has spotted a few thoughts, Nick. So Anna, I saw your hand was up and it went down and it was back up. So
Yep.
Yeah, I think it depends where the ball is crossing, if it's crossing between the antennas or not. This is the main point, I think, because then if it's not crossing between the antennas, they can get it back. But if it's crossing between the antennas, then you can't do much about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we have two more. Tim, I think your hand was up first, and then Rita afterwards if you want to jump in.
I think most of the other people covered what I was going to say anyway, so yeah.
Thanks, Tim. Rita, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I was just going to make the observation that the player sitting on the bench is supposed to keep his backside on the bench anyway. So technically, it's breaking the rule.
Yeah, so in that situation, Rita, I can see you giving someone a stern look, or calling the captain over and informing them of that situation.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay. We talked about the next one before, but an attack hit is touched by Team B's blockers and flies into the free zone where it hits Team B's coach. What signal do you use? Okay, so which signal do we use? It's an either or. Do we use ball touched or do we use out?
No hands up so far on this one, Nick. Oh, there we go. Spoke too soon. Nacho?
Out, we said, right?
Yep, out. Okay, and which signal would we expect because it's an external object or a person out of play, so what signal would we expect the line judge to use?
Raising the flag.
Okay, yeah, so the out signal, as opposed to a wave and point, which was what you would do if it hit an object rather than a person. Okay? Okay, so the ball flies off Team B's block and hits a player standing in the warm-up area, which is behind line judge 2, about 2 meters from the corner of the court, and the team recover the ball.
This might be one you have to share your thoughts on this one, Nick.
Okay, so this is one of the ones whereby when you're setting out how your court is going to be before the start of the match, you know how much space you've got, and you'll know whether your player's warm-up area is going to be inside the free zone or outside, or is going to encroach the free zone. Technically, the warm-up area is always outside the free zone, regardless of where it is. So in this instance, because the player is actually in the warm-up area, they're outside the free zone, and therefore the ball is out or whatever. So I was just wanting, with this question, it's a bit of a silly question, but I just wanted you to think about the situation whereby you have players close to, particularly to line judge 2 or line judge 3, that are warming up because you've got a small area, and that whilst they're warming up, they are actually outside your free zone. So you just need to understand what is free zone, free playing space, and what isn't free. But as I say, bit of a silly situation. But that's where my thoughts were going on why I asked that question. Okay, so casebook then, there aren't many cases on ball in, out, or rule 10, but there are a couple. So the ball, the first hit flew outside the antenna. The setter pursued the ball into the opponent's free zone and tried to play it back, but the ball went towards the court and net on the opponent's side. The first referee whistled and signalled ball out. At what moment does the ball become out? Now, we did mention it earlier, so who's going to jump in first?
Tim, I think you were the fastest there.
Okay, as soon as it goes all over the court, into the opponent's court, it is out.
Yeah, absolutely. So as soon as it crosses the sideline, okay, in the opponent's court, it becomes out. Okay. So 3.5 then, a player jumped into the air trying to retrieve the ball near the spectator seats on his own side of the net. After contacting the ball, he landed in the seats. Is this a legal action?
Look, let's step in.
Yep, it is.
Absolutely, because
it's outside the free zone on his own side, so he can play the ball.
Absolutely. So the distinction here is the difference between your playing court and the opponent playing court, and because it's
the spectacular ones I've seen on videos at times.
Yeah, there are some quite spectacular recoveries. There's one within YouTube that actually shows a whole load of these all in a row, which is quite good to see. So spectacular recoveries. Okay, 3.8 then. A ball went off blocker A's head over the antenna into the free zone of B. The player of A pursued the ball to play it back to his side of the net. is it possible to play it back like this?
Rita, what do you think? Is it possible?
Yes, because it didn't cross completely in the complete planes in the crossing space.
Absolutely. So it was partly through the external space, and therefore it could be played back in the same way. So this is a ball which has gone sideways off the block over the top of the antenna. Okay, and remember, it has to only be partly over the antenna. So the ball could, for all intents and purposes, look like it's gone through the crossing space, but as long as some of it is close over the top of the antenna, then it is still in play for the team to recover. So 3.9, should the line judge signal when after the second hit of a team the ball crosses the net plane through the external space into the opponent's free zone? Very, very good FIVB English there. So what they're saying is, after the second hit of a team, the ball goes crosses the net space through the external space into the opponent's free zone. What is the line judge's signal?
Tim, what would you say?
He should point away.
Yep.
They're going to affect the net playing through the external space. Oh, it should be out then. He should indicate it's out.
Yeah. So he's got he can still.
No way to play back.
No, absolutely, and that's the key thing I think they're trying to get at here, is the fact that the team can't recover it, and therefore the line judge can either wave on point as the ball's crossing through the external space, or the line judge can wait until the ball lands and then signal it out. Okay. And 3.11 is simply a question about Nikola Gribic, and therefore we don't need to cover that one again, because that's the case at which that clip of Gribic comes from. Okay, and I think that is all I had. Yeah, absolutely. So have we got any questions or anything anybody wants to raise? I can sort of come off the presentation actually. Let's see if I can do that, and then I can see you all.
Yes, if you got any questions that you haven't raised so far, please raise your hand or pop it in the chat. But we did have a few during the session that we didn't manage to touch on, and then one on via email. So right at the start, when you talk about pancaking, Nick, Nacho had asked, during a pancake, how does the second ref make a judgment on whether the first ref was in a position to see the contact of the ball with the floor? Okay, so this is always a good one. I think it's just simply a case of, as first and second referee, you have a lot of eye contact between the two of you, and therefore it's always worth having a look at each other. And if you're both attuned to what's going on, then the first referee will know why the second referee is looking at them, and will make some form of indication as to, I've seen that and it's fine with me. This is the same thing about when you see maybe an illegal back row attack. Okay, the first referee may have a judgment, and they may have already decided whether it is a fault or not, and therefore the two referees should just get some eye contact. The first referee could, for example, signal, don't think the ball was high enough, or I've seen that ball there, I've seen that ball, and I've let play go. So it's a situation whereby you could do that. Alternatively, if you believe the ball has contacted the floor, regardless of whether you think the first referee has seen it or not, you are within your rights to whistle that ball as in. Okay, so in that situation, it really it depends on the situation, but in that case, with a pancake, if you think the ball has touched the ground and the first referee may not, and you're sure, you signal it in. Second referee, you're allowed to. Hope that answered your question there, Nacho. So when you were covering ball out earlier, Nick, Tim had asked, if the ball just touches the block and then hits the coach, should we signal touch or out? So in that instance, it would be out, because the coach is still a player out of play, or a person out of play in that instance. So in that case, it's always out. We had oh, go on, sorry, Nick. So this is just one that gives players that extra knowledge that you know what you give them this
the first few points of a match are the ones where you show them that how you're going to referee it and what sort of style you have, and things like when attack hits go into the net and the ball drops and another player touches it and you give 4 hits rather than just blindly going for a ball in, which is the cop-out decision. It's those moments that show whether this referee is attuned to what's going on around the court. They know the rules, they've got a good depth of knowledge, they know that the players will know they'll be expected to see that ball being given out and not ball touched. And if they see the referee go for ball touch, they might go, do you know what, I'm not sure about you yet. If they see you going out, they know, I know this referee knows exactly what's going on around the court. So it's just one of those ones, it's a confidence thing, about making the right choice about what to signal.
Tim, I noticed you popped your hand up there. Is there something you wanted to a follow-up question to ask?
Well, I'm just going to add, if the block denied the fact that they actually touched the ball and it goes straight to the hitting coach, then the fact that you were indicating the side that hit the attacking side as having the thing, it would be confusion. There could be confusion if you go and indicate out.
Yeah, that's very true. But you can also have the ability to indicate the player. So what you can do in that situation is immediately follow your signal up with yes, and the ball came off this blocker or came off that blocker, or if you feel that it would be too confusing, then by all means go with ball touched. But just explain to them the reason I've gone with ball touched is so that you know it came off your block and that's what's happened. Sometimes you have to explain yourself and give the players a bit more information, and maybe that's one of those situations whereby you've got a choice. You could go either way. Whichever way you go, you might have to explain. But good point.
There's another question from Nacho, who asked, during pre-match checks, what do you do if the net doesn't rebound enough?
Yeah, you're pretty stuffed at that point, aren't you, I suppose, to be honest. If the team doesn't have an alternative and you can't get any more tension on it, some nets are like that, then you just have to go with what you can. But if you give yourself enough time before the warm-up starts to make sure that you've checked the net height and got the tension on it, because obviously the team might put the net up and you get the right height and they go, yeah, the net's the right height there, but they put no tension on it. So as soon as you go and put tension on it, you go and change the height. So what you need to do is you need to have that bit of time so that you can actually make sure that you've checked that and the net is as tight as you can. It is quite often something that happens that when I go abroad for international appointments, one of the first things we do is normally have to tell the court assistant or the court manager, can you tighten the net up and then reset the height, because the nets are just, you just need to make sure that you've got the net right. If it won't, you can't do anything about it. You'll just have to play with it. It'll just have to be that way. But if you can do something about it, do something about it.
So we had a question that came in ahead of today's session from Tim, and it was just touched on his own personal experience. And Tim said, I was refereeing a game where during an attack, the ball hit the top band before going into the opposition's court. This caused the aerial to come off the net. He said it was attached by old Velcro. So I whistled and signalled a double fault. Was this the correct action and the correct hand signal? The attacking team claimed it was their point, which I dismissed.
Of course they would. In that instance, absolutely, you need to stop the play. Yeah. So this is the same. It's the same instance for anything, like a player twisting their ankle or falling over or clattering into something. If you think there's any reason that the court is not safe, you stop play. And the antenna coming off the net, I would think, is one of the things that I would say was not a safe thing to be happening, because you got, it could hit a player in the eye, whatever. So regardless of where the ball is, in that instance, no, sorry, the antenna came off the net. We are replaying this point after we fixed it.
bit of sellotape do the job or something like that. The last question then, Anna, you've got your hand up there. Would you like to ask a question?
There is one question about the pancake as well.
Yeah.
If second referee will whistle the fault, and from my point of view, let's say I'm the first referee, and from my point of view, I'm pretty sure there was no mistake. So I've got my own view. I know with the line judges is a bit different because they're standing in different places and everything. And when the second referee will stop the game, and he is sure that it was in, and I'm sure it was on the hand, shall I stick to his decision? Like I'm asking about kind of art of the refereeing.
Okay. Yeah.
Because it can cause many problems from the players after, like you.
Absolutely. In that situation, you've got to be seen as to being a referee corps. You're all part of the referee team, and you're refereeing the match together. Whether you think the other referee has made the right call or not, your job is to be supportive. And in that case, if the second referee has decided that the pancake was ball in and has whistled it, then you would, if the captain came over and said, "Ref, really?" You would just say that the second referee is in a completely different position to see that than I am. Okay, and
Yeah.
they're within their right if they think the ball has contacted the court to give that ball as ball in. Okay, whether you believe it or not, you can have that chat in the changing room afterwards, or when you're having a cup of tea or whatever with them about whether you think their call was right or not. But during the game, you show a united front. You're all one team, and therefore you support each other.
Yeah, that's what I thought. But I had a couple of situations as a second referee working with other referees. Not often, but sometimes it's happening. Like they overruling a second referee, even if you're trying to explain after, and this causing many not good situation for the second referee on this case, because then any other call you make, the players will use it against you. So it's kind of.
My view as a second referee in the pancake situation, if the first referee doesn't call it and you're not 100% certain, you don't call it.
Yeah.
Be clever.
Yeah.
As with everything, be clever. And there are times when you don't make a decision because it's the best decision to not make, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, I just asked because we've got like many information from other sides, from different referees. There are other like point of views and explanation for this kind of thing. So I thought it's better to clarify that and just.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Thank you, Anna, and that brings a close into the submitted questions or hands up.
Great. Well, thank you very much for your attendance. As always, it's been an absolute pleasure to see so many of you and to be able to talk through these two rules with you. As I say, next time we'll look at interference, and we will look specifically at interference so that we can have a bit of a decent discussion about it. And we'll do that in 2 weeks' time. But until then, I hope that you have you're safe and you keep well. And it's been a pleasure to be able to talk with you this evening.